Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. My guest today is Terrance Yang, and Terrance is a previous podcast guest and friend for a long time. And we're going to have a really interesting conversation about a lot of things. But we were just talking about the debt in the United States, which is this giant thing, just like sitting there like a sword of Damocles that potentially may be solved and potentially may not be solved. So, welcome to the show, Terrance.
Hey, great to be here. Great to see you again.
Yep.
Uh,
So,
yeah, so go ahead.
So let's go into what we were just talking about. We were talking about, there's this election that happened, and on the show we don't go into like direct politics. We can go there if we want,
Yeah,
but we talk about it from a meta politics and nuanced angle, and really interested to figure out your background as being a finance guy. You understand finance. You understand the way finance works through the system. Is that accurate?
yes. Although I will say most people in finance do not understand money, which is why I got into Bitcoin and had to relearn, unlearn a lot of things I thought I knew.
Yeah.
But in terms of the debt, it's obviously growing way too fast. $1 trillion every 100 days or so, federal debt. But what not enough people talk about, especially the doomers, the gold bugs, Bitcoin maxis, um, and frankly, a lot of the people who were on the Trump side of things,
Hmm.
um, is that notwithstanding the growth in debt, federal net outlays, meaning cash flow, cash in versus cash out. So tax revenues plus fees, right? Taxes plus fees into the government minus all the expenditures, defense, Social Security, Medicare, interest on debt, and all the other expenses. That is obviously negative cash flow. We're spending more than we're taking in, or the government is, and that's bad. But as a percentage of GDP, it's not that bad.
Hmm.
So this is what happened in World War II. Obviously, we were racking up huge debt. Only half the working age population was actually working, meaning
Hmm.
women were working and the men were off at war. And when we when World War II ended and we won, debt was never paid down,
Yeah.
but we grew our way out of the debt, meaning
Yeah. Yeah.
GDP
Interesting.
growth exceeded the debt growth. And so it was no longer a problem. The cash percentage of negative cash flow as a percentage of GDP, federal net outlays, cash in minus cash out, was not that bad as a percentage of GDP over time. The question is, can we replicate it here? Can we cut spending, cut debt with Doge that Elon Musk and Vivek are heading, or other things? I think even a slowdown and the increased awareness in spending, government waste, debt deficits, that's going to have a positive impact on the rate of growth
Yeah.
in debt, the rate of growth in deficits, and the rate of growth in spending. Even if it continues to grow, it just grows more slowly. That'll be good. And the emphasis on GDP growth from quote unquote the real economy, maybe the private sector, that will be good because it's not sustainable to just create GDP by creating government jobs and increasing government spending. That's not sustainable longer term.
Yeah, yeah, because that's the
As
Ponzi,
you
right?
know, in
That's the
Argentina,
Ponzi. The
that's
Ponzi
the
is
Ponzi.
creating
Yes,
is
yes.
creating government jobs, right? That's the Ponzi scheme.
So we do need government jobs,
Yeah,
but we don't need that many, and they have to be productive. There needs
yeah,
to be metrics, what they
yeah,
do in Singapore
yeah,
and whatever Malay's doing. You can speak to that more than I
yeah.
can in Argentina. But yeah, there are now models for success. And I can't believe in my lifetime, libertarians and people who want limited government are
Yeah,
actually
it's
winning
crazy.
because
Yeah, it's crazy.
yeah,
Javier Milei is the first representative libertarian, explicit libertarian that has ever been elected. There's one counterpoint to that, which says that Botswana in the 1950s and the 1960s had a libertarian government that was democratically elected. So, but if you
okay.
don't count that, Javier Milei is the first democratically elected libertarian government. So it is an experiment. And I brought this up to a previous guest who is Argentine and knows the situation down here much better. And he said it's not an experiment because the whole liberal tradition, and I don't mean liberal here in the United States term, I'm talking about European liberals, the whole liberal tradition started this way. We only started to move away from it in the 1910s and the 1920s. With the rise of the Federal Reserve, with the demolishing of the gold standard, that's when we started, and the rise of the welfare state. And the only reason Argentina knows about this better than the United States is that the welfare state was more out of control in Argentina than it is the United States. If there's anything you want to respond to there, feel free to. But I have one question. I looked up the debt to percentage of GDP in the U.S. right now. Is that the right metric that you're looking at? Because that's at 123.
No, that is a scary graph. There are many scary graphs, and this is a huge concern longer term.
Yeah,
there's a big risk. It's not inevitable. So I disagree that, especially with the Trump election and Elon and Vivek seeming to work well and tweeting all the time, and you have all these smart people applying to work free for zero money, 80 hours a week to work on Doge. So I'm hopeful.
What is the metric though? What is the
federal
metric?
net outlays as a percentage of GDP.
Okay.
Federal net outlays, meaning all the negative cash flow.
Yeah.
As a percentage of GDP, and you just type that in, you should see some from the Federal Reserve of St. Louis, a graph that shows that it spiked during World War II, really high, came back down, was very low. For example, in 2000, when we balanced the budget under President Clinton, and it went back up, obviously, with the financial crisis in 2008. And during in the early stages of COVID, you could argue that that was warranted because
it was 47%, 47% in 2020.
Yep. And it federal net outlays.
Yeah,
percentage of GDP.
This is on Perplexity. This is on Perplexity, so I can't be. I can't be sure.
Perplexity's good.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. You know what would be interesting while we're talking? If you don't mind, I will run in the background. Hopefully, it doesn't affect the Zoom. I don't think it will. I'm going to run in the background. I just signed up for ChatGPT Pro mode.
Oh, interesting.
Amazing. It takes time, but it's amazing. Okay, so federal net outlays.
You can share your screen if you want to.
Sure. Let me close out some of the other stuff. Except for the crazy wisdom, I can show that. Because you have both a blog on Substack and a podcast on Apple, Spotify, and so forth. Okay. You know what? I need to.
And while you're doing this, I'll say what Perplexity has going on. So Perplexity says that net outlays were 22% of GDP in January 2023. Government spending in the United States reached 34% of GDP in 2023, with projections indicating an increase to 37.5% by the end of 2024. And then the highest level was 47% of GDP in 2020. Lowest level was 2.9% of GDP in 1929, and then a historical average of 25% of GDP from 1900 to 2023.
So I'm going to say something that most libertarians and a lot of Bitcoin maxis don't like. You have to understand why we got to where we are. So 1929 is a perfect example. Great Depression, unregulated stock market. You had the Federal Reserve created, the SEC created, securities laws passed, and so forth. And that's all to try to prevent another stock market crash that causes
not scammers. It's the up and down, That's what they're trying to stop.
Yeah. So every law, everything that exists is because of bad SHIT that happened in the past.
Yeah.
Every law. So there were no laws when we were tribal and so forth. And the only reason we had laws was to promote scaling, and because there's always one idiot who did something bad, whether it's murder, insider trading, causing the Great Depression, causing a financial crisis or whatever. And then you have all these other laws and agencies and governments that expanded as a reaction to it. Now we're going the other way. So everything's a pendulum, right? And we've swung way too far in, I think, your view and mine and many Americans, way too far to growing government and too much bureaucracy and waste. Well intended, but ineffective. So, for example, in California, we spent billions of dollars on high speed rail, built about 2.1 miles over decades or whatever. And you go to China and no human rights, but they just destroy. If the CCP wants to build high speed rail, doesn't matter what the cities and counties think, they're just going to do it. They're not going to add all these stops, and you have no, the eminent domain is used all the time to, or whatever their version is, to take away property rights or housing from people. If you're in the way moved, and you're going to have to get cash, or if they move you to a new place to live or whatever. Displacement happens all the time for the quote unquote greater good, but shit gets done. So we need to get back to shit done.
Getting shit done, but the regulation gets in the way. And this is what I like about the experiment that's going on in Argentina, is that even though Milei calls himself an anarcho-capitalist, I don't see evidence that he is an anarcho-capitalist in the full sense of like totally destroying government. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing.
A good point. Yeah.
Because if he was a full-on anarcho-capitalist, maybe the difference here is that he's not a naive anarcho-capitalist. Because a naive anarcho-capitalist would completely remove the government immediately, or try to, but there's no way to completely remove the government. So it's like there's something that needs to happen. There needs to be limited regulation, and the regulation needs to be limited. But one thing he's done recently, which impressed me, was that there's a low-cost carrier in Argentina that is constantly late. So people are booking flights on this thing, constantly canceling the thing, and he's deregulated the airlines. So he's done the limited regulation, but now he's told this low-cost carrier that they can't be late anymore. He's using the government to say you can't do that.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that's all a good thing for me. I think in order to be serious, we need to understand that the government is an important aspect of what we need, but it's not in its current state.
Yeah. I think it's important to be principled, a good balance of principled plus pragmatic. So even though in theory he would like to be a crypto anarchist, let's assume we take him at his word. In practice, it's just too much change too fast. And we've seen that happen time and again, where change is inevitable. It's good to push the envelope. Look, I worked on the Obama campaign. I worked on derivatives. Sometimes it backfired, right? And Bitcoin and startups. And I believe in innovation and change, but sometimes it's too much change too fast. And you see that with whether it's Kamala allegedly, and I don't want to get too political here, but the reports were that in some circles that she wanted to pay for transgender surgery by people in prison or immigrants, illegal immigrants, which sounds ridiculous. Like, what a waste of money when you should be taking care of American citizens and Americans who are here legally first, and give them just basic housing and food, and or getting inflation down and things like that. Like, if you're going to subsidize anything or pay for stuff, it should start with your own people. So here's an idea that I would like to see implemented real quick. No more money to non-American people, however you define American people. And the Democrats and Republicans and others can battle out if that's going to include illegal immigrants, and is there a path for them to, because they've already been here and have kids and have established roots, is it too disruptive and unfair to kick them out when they've shown that they're good actors if they haven't committed crimes and so forth? And then you kind of stop or curtail illegal immigration and just have guest worker visas or legal immigration, preferably
Hmm.
more based on merit rather than family. But the back to the main idea is no more cash to big business, pharma, big
Yeah.
oil, big solar, whatever. You're not a human being. Number one. Number two,
Yeah,
if you're
that's an
not
interesting point. Yeah, yeah.
a human being, you get prioritized. So if you're an American human being, you get
Hmm.
subsidies because look, we need, I think a lot of us would agree, we need safety nets, or it's just cheaper to give people, the homeless people, cash, which is what they want, rather than social program. Like if you ask homeless people, are
Yeah,
you in California, are you getting $14,000 a year in benefits? Or what amount in benefits do you think you're getting? Because that's how much we're spending per
yeah,
homeless person,
yeah,
given all of the grants to nonprofits and government agencies and these full employment acts for the, frankly, what's become the upper middle class. If you can get a subsidized, if you can get a cushy government job and not have to
yeah.
produce very much, which is the
And now it's
entire
all
home.
remote too. So there's a bunch of things that
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So one is the fact that Biden might be trying to institutionalize the remote jobs, the nature of the United States government, which is crazy. But right before the incoming administration comes in. But then you were talking about cash transfers. I really like this idea of cash transfers for human
Mm.
beings rather than a corporate state. I've been doing a lot of research into how corporations became individuals under the Constitution, and it's a very interesting history behind that, which we don't have to go into at this point. But this idea of cash transfers is really interesting within Argentina's perspective because uh, the whole country has been addicted to the welfare state in terms of cash transfers in pensions. So everybody was getting pensions, and so they were living a comfortable life, getting government pensions, and that was working. It was
Okay.
working until hyperinflation, and then hyperinflation started to eat away at the pensions,
Interesting.
and then the pensions basically then didn't do anything. And so now poverty
Yeah.
was at 52%. Now I think it's down to 47% since Milei took over. And so Argentina is at the very far end of this experiment of doing. And so one thing I believe Milei did in the early days was he said, okay, we're going to continue the pensions. We're going to do this for one more year. You have one more year to get a job. But I don't see him being able to not do what you just said of giving human beings direct, because it's like with AI, with automation, with all of these things coming down the pipeline. I don't see, not maybe not UBI, but like about a human being, like making sure human beings have energy, have housing, water, and food. Like those are really important
Yeah.
things for all human beings. So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah. What do you think?
No, I think that's right. I agree with that. So there's a saying that a lot of the problems, whether it's crime or bad
Mm.
behavior in the streets of downtown San Francisco, and you and I have hung out there, including at
Yeah,
my
yeah,
old building I may or may not have lived in next to
yeah,
Twitter, Uber, and Square.
yeah.
Um, Great building, terrible area. But like a lot of the problems in society are caused by, it's like a bell curve, right? A very few number
Yeah.
of people. So how do we get those number of people the help they need? Might be cash handouts with some supervision or nudging,
Hmm.
and you know, consequences for good and bad behavior both. You can't have, for example, in Santa Monica, I read on Reddit, there's someone who yells starting at 4:45 a.m. at a apartment building, and many people who work and pay taxes can't get sleep. And
Yeah,
if you're a little bit sensitive, notwithstanding noise cancellation headphones and all
yeah,
that,
yeah.
unless you pay for double pane windows or triple pane windows, your quality of life is horrible. And the cops will visit. They'll even send, I think, someone from the homeless services to be with a person for a week,
Oh,
and that
interesting.
person will stop shouting, but then they leave after that and they go back to shouting and screaming.
Yeah.
So at a very high pitch or very loud. So you have all these things that impact quality of life. by a few people, whether it's crime or just, disturbing the peace or whatever, and stuff can't get done. And then people don't want to live in San Francisco or Man Francisco. And one reason, for example, more sensitive people, including women, don't want to live in San Francisco is
Yeah,
because they don't
yeah.
want to have to
Deal
constantly
with that.
evaluate, is this homeless person, usually a man, stable or unstable? Right? That's the question. If they're unstable, they need to guard up. I knew a nurse who was tough as F
Yeah.
from the English countryside, blue collar, tough as nails, right? No BS. But she was, a slight woman. She worked the overnight shift as a nurse in San Francisco, took the subway back because it's, far away and expensive. And there were started to be homeless people or just people hanging out, street people who seemed kind of intimidating in the stairwell where she exited. So she started carrying a knife in her hand in case she needed to stab someone to defend herself.
Yeah.
That's how scared she was. And she's tough. I was stunned
Yeah.
that she felt she needed to do that. Because, yeah. Anyway, so there's all these things that cause, you know, only men to live in downtown LA or mostly men to live in near mid-market San Francisco or Tenderloin adjacent areas and so forth. And it just skews everything.
Yeah.
It's not good. Yeah.
A lot we can go from here. Basically, San Francisco is so interesting because I just went back there, and San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco feels sort of done for me in terms of my
Wow.
place to live. It was my walkable city with good weather year round, which means no great snowstorms, and walkable city. There's no other walkable cities. You're down in Los Angeles, like there's no walkable part of Los Angeles. You have to have a car if you're in Los Angeles. And it would be Los Angeles would be the perfect city if it were walkable, but it's far away from that. And then you have New York, and you have Montreal, and you have Washington D.C., all of which are great walkable cities in the Western Hemisphere, but with horrible winters. And so Buenos Aires is the only other city besides San Francisco that is a
Mm,
walkable city with good weather year round, with the same culture.
okay.
And it's absolutely the opposite of what you just said of Man Francisco. It has the same ratio between men and women as New York. So not a desperate attempt to mediate the autistic conversations at tech events in San Francisco, which I did. I do enjoy
Yeah.
those, but we can have those here in Buenos Aires without all
Yeah.
the other
And you're
crazy stuff about San
great at
Francisco.
that. I remember our Silicon Valley Bitcoin
Yep,
meetup event that where you interviewed me.
perfect segue because
That was great.
yeah.
Yeah, you're this.
So Bitcoin meetup in San Jose. This was probably 2016, 2017. It was all the core group of
Might have been
Bitcoin
Sunnyvale.
people. It was
Yeah.
Sunnyvale, yeah, Sunnyvale, and so core group of Bitcoin people, very interesting, very hard to navigate socially speaking because everybody is super autistic. But I love those scenes because it's so divergent. You get such an interesting view into other people's reality tunnel. But Bitcoin, where are we now with Bitcoin? What's your take on Bitcoin? What's your take on crypto? Are you still anti everything else?
I wouldn't say anti everything else. It's more I'm indifferent to everything else. We're at a stage where I think people have figured out, and there are enough Bitcoin evangelists who are like, you really don't want to do crypto unless you have inside information,
Uh,
possibly illegal.
yeah,
Because your buddy from college is in a new meme coin and you can get in on it early. So there are people making money in altcoins or coins, cryptocurrencies other than Bitcoin. Unfortunately, it's just insiders and VCs and people like that, not US retail. These other coins are for pumping and dumping on retail, including regular working Americans. So they're terrible and they should be regulated, honestly, just like gambling's regulated, just like stocks are regulated, penny stocks, and so forth. They're very speculative and have a negative value by the time you hear about it or are able to buy it. They're negative net present value. Doesn't mean you can't make money, but it's extremely hard. And you really need to have the money to play poker, enough money to enter in and to go all in when you need to. So you need to start with cash and then have the mental fortitude to trade. A lot of smart people overthink this, including myself, and others just don't have the emotional makeup to be good traders.
What is the emotional makeup to be a good trader?
You need to be willing to be wrong 49.9999% of the time. You need to size correctly, and you need to be humble and live in reality at all times, because as soon as you're not, you're going to lose money. And now you're competing these days, not just with former Goldman Sachs and Bridgewater traders who are now doing crypto full time to rip you off, not rip you off, but eat your lunch, because they have better models, better information, and they're smarter. And just
but you're also a long-term
competing
investor.
With AI. So long-term, the only crypto I like is Bitcoin. I don't like trading Bitcoin. I think most people lose money. You're going up against Jane Street and Goldman Sachs and others that are making markets in Bitcoin and have information, legal information from order book size and deal flow from institutions and ultra high net worth people and family offices moving in and out of Bitcoin, whether it's through the BlackRock ETF or what others. So you just have these huge market makers now.
So wait, can we go into that? I don't understand what you just said about legal information from order books and market makers. Are you saying that a part of the IP in terms of these financial companies is that they have these giant order books so they can see into the financial markets?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. What is a market maker?
And it's market maker is someone who buys and sells a specific product or products like Bitcoin, like Apple stock. And all they do is they're like a dealer. If you want to buy, they'll make a price to sell you at. If you want to sell, they make a price that they'll buy at.
Oh, interesting.
So they're a dealer as opposed to a broker that works with dealers and just puts your order through on your behalf in batches. Yeah. So, and it's as opposed to proprietary trading, right? So the traders at the big banks, Merrill, Goldman, Morgan Stanley, etc., JP, they are making markets. And after 2008, their ability to do proprietary trading is curtailed.
Yeah. Proprietary trading. That seems like
proprietary trading, your own money or someone else's money, where you are the customer. And so you have to be right more than 50% of the time, net of fees, because you're paying the.
That's the fiduciary duty.
No, that's there is no fiduciary duty, because you're just trading money that Goldman gives you, or George Soros gives you, or Ray Dalio at Bridgewater gives you. And if you screw up, you just get fired. So there's no fiduciary duty. It's just you're trading someone else's money, and they will fire your ass if you screw up.
Lose money. Yeah. Interesting.
Okay. Or you're trading your own money, and if you screw up, you just go bankrupt. So no fiduciary duty, but you're just highly incented to be right. But most people can't do it.
Because of what you're talking about. The trading. Yeah, go for it.
Correct. Yeah, trading is like playing in the NFL or playing pro basketball, where you're an amateur and you're playing against Michael Jordan or LeBron James. It's insane. Why would you do it? So what's the solution? Admit you're a sheep and show others you're a sheep. You don't want to be a sheep in wolf's clothing. That's what day
Yeah.
trading is.
Yeah.
Idiot. You open an account with E-Trade, which is owned by Morgan Stanley. You think you're a genius because you made, you know, 3x on Solana. Then you try to do that with some other coins and you lose all your money because
Yeah.
you start getting overconfident and you're just lucky initially.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah. Yeah.
riding the tails of a bubble.
Yeah.
So basically, what is the equivalent of that in finance? Vanguard, S&P 500 index funds
Yeah.
is the perfect example. I was taught this at Harvard Business School when I cross-registered when I was a student at Harvard Law School. I took
Oh,
great
interesting.
finance course. And one of the professors basically taught us one theory is if you are a sheep, just admit you're a sheep. Just be
Yeah.
like, I'm going
Yeah.
to be
Same.
average. I'm going to be average. I'm going to buy the S&P 500 and be average, but net of fees because the expenses on this sheep fund, Vanguard Index 500 fund, not sexy at all. I'm a sheep. I don't know what the F I'm doing, but I do
Yeah.
want the market
Access.
returns. I'm going to
Yeah.
be minus expenses after 30 years, after 50 years, you're going to outperform 99.9% of active managers, if not
Wow.
basically 100%, almost 100%, because the fees end up mattering so much. And most investors, active investors, have too much cash, which hurts the return of the fund. And they're not that good,
Uh-huh.
or they're good initially because they're lucky or they're small. Then they become huge and they can't beat the market at scale because it's too hard. Look at Warren Buffett and the Berkshire Hathaway, which I have deep respect for in many ways. Um, but the problem is they're so big now, it's very hard to outperform the
Mm.
S&P 500. They sit on a lot of cash. Buffett,
So that's why they don't
Berkshire
invest
Hathaway,
cash. Is that also why also why Apple doesn't invest and Google? Is that why they're just sitting on hordes of cash? Is it just as a larger company, it's harder to do these
um,
things?
yeah. So two things. One is once you're an operating company like Google, Apple, Microsoft, and you're mature, you're a legal monopoly by
Mm.
definition. You have a wide moat, as Buffett would say, but it's Peter Thiel, legal monopoly, same thing.
Yeah.
You have so much market dominance, you make huge profits, and you can't invest fast enough in research and development. You don't have good enough ideas. So you sit in cash. And a
Yeah.
lot of times you increase or issue dividends or do share buybacks to give cash back to shareholders. It's like, look, we're making so much money. We're going to give the
Yeah.
cash back to you, the shareholder, and you can invest in
Yeah. Yeah.
something
Yeah.
else
Interesting.
because we don't
Interesting.
know what to do with the cash and it's not efficient. Berkshire Hathaway, I have a different theory. In
Uh,
addition to generating a lot of cash, they don't see value right now because the
uh,
market's very frothy.
uh.
So, yeah,
Oh, okay. Your
their
market's
way
very profit. Oh,
buying
ooh, ooh.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, perfect entry to something I've been trying to think through.
sure.
AI. We haven't talked about AI yet. We barely talked about Bitcoin. I want to go back to Bitcoin, but I want to go into this AI investment case.
Love it.
AI
Yeah.
investment case. Foundational models. They've been throwing billions and billions of dollars into the foundational models. It seems like, in my opinion, and the voice note you left also makes me think that you probably think the same way, which is that this is all the value is going to the customers who are now paying $20 a month. Some are paying $200 a month. But most of the
I'm paying
value,
200.
you're paying 200. Somebody else who I
Yeah.
know, who I respect, also is paying 200 for it. I might potentially do it. A lot of people are not going to do it, but so maybe OpenAI probably ends up at number one. Anthropic probably ends up at number two, and maybe Cohere or Perplexity ends up at two or three. All of Adept AI. I'll explain what happened with Adept AI, which is they raised $400 million, and then Amazon copying Microsoft when Microsoft acquired Inflection AI to try to get around the regulatory scrutiny of the activist DOJ. Basically, Amazon went in and just licensed the technology, brought on the people, and paid back investors $25 million rather than the $400 million that the private investors had invested inside this thing. IPO market was destroyed from 2023 and 24, still has not recovered. So like it seems like the whole venture game is sort of collapsing. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think?
I don't know enough about it. I need to
Yeah,
dig into it.
yeah.
One of the things I'm going to do is ask the AI LLM models that you talked about, whether it's Claude or ChatGPT Pro or Perplexity and so forth, Anthropic. But don't sleep on Google Gemini because
Yes.
Google has all this data.
Yeah.
And one thing you can do is allegedly with a premium model, which I think I want to try. It's only $20 a month, so just try it
Mhm.
for a month or two, see how it goes. But they're supposed to be able to, you know, combine it with Google search results and
Which
make
is
it
which is
easier
makes
because in Google, whether it's Gmail or Google Docs or whatever, so the more integrated they are, the stickier it'll be. And I might need to get an eSIM for my Android device instead of using it as a kind of a dummy. Yeah.
wait. Explain that. I don't understand what you're doing with the eSIM.
Sorry. So I have multiple phones. Right
Uh-huh.
now, I just use my iPhone, but
Yeah.
I might need to get an eSIM or SIM card for my Android to use that as a phone too, so that I can, see if there's a difference between Google Gemini on the
Mhm.
Android versus on the iPhone and so forth, and just have
I,
better integration with other Google.
well, I just switched from a Google Pixel to an iPhone, hoping that Apple Intelligence would be something, and Apple Intelligence was not something. It feels like all of the big tech companies are basically uh, totally out in the water on a life raft, trying to figure out how to re-architect all of their systems to develop to have LLMs be native in a way that is completely making it really difficult for all of these companies to adapt. Google took way too long. Apple's taking way too long. Notion, all of these types of companies it looks like they have
Sure.
to re-architect their entire systems, and new startups can
Yeah.
come in and take out pieces of them, which I think they're going to do. What do you think?
Yeah, no, for sure. There's a lot to that.
Mhm.
But I feel like the leaders of those companies, Google, Apple, Microsoft. I'm not sure about Amazon. I don't know how involved Bezos is with AI. I think he was involved. Maybe he's still involved and hopefully full time on it instead of just being retired and working at Cannes Film Festival, whatever. Um, those are very strong legal monopolies with
Yeah,
wide moats and
yeah,
areas. So, for example, you talked about LA not being a walkable city. There are parts of LA that are walkable, whether
yeah.
it's Santa Monica, West
Venice.
Hollywood, or even parts in like South Pasadena, San Gabriel Valley area.
Oh,
And
interesting.
that's number one.
Okay.
Yeah. Number two, yeah, next time you're out here, I'm
Yeah.
going to get you out here. I want you to
Oh,
come after Waymo, the
yeah.
driverless Google owned
Yeah.
self-driving cars. After that's all over Southern California.
Yeah.
And you and I are going to sit in a
Yeah.
Waymo
Yeah.
in rush hour, and you're going to see how different it is from when you might remember
Yeah.
riding in an Uber or renting a car, because one bad Uber
Yeah.
driver or Lyft driver
Interesting.
can ruin your whole experience, and
Do
they're
you
not
think
consistent. Yeah. So
do you do you think driving cars will eliminate traffic?
no, I think it's going to increase traffic, but your enjoyment of traffic, your
Will
ability
be
to
better. Yep.
meditate, take a nap,
Yep.
eat,
Yep.
um, play a video game, and just be totally immersed in work while you're stuck in traffic, traveling slowly and gradually in a Waymo because you can only do 12 miles an hour or 2 miles an hour. It's going to change everything, and people are going to live more remote because it's cheaper to live in Riverside or Palm Springs or their outskirts than it is to live in Santa Monica. So it's going to make LA even more
Bigger.
spread, but it's going to make LA much more desirable than it is now
Oh,
because some people cannot
the
stand
capital.
traffic. Is it?
And
Yeah.
and the scene too. With this wraps in. This is getting me very excited about having LA be my future base in terms of California, far in the future, probably about 5 years.
Yeah.
But LA seems like it's going to be more important. And the property in LA made me think about the property in LA might be a good bet to make as well. But also, I want to bring in this highly speculative thing that I discovered actually in San Francisco at one of those autistic meetups. It was a crypto meetup. That they gave me. I can't remember the name. It's probably better not to mention the name. But I met a guy named Leo who has turned into a friend of mine, and he worked on the Cybertruck at Tesla, and he's now building a flying car. And I've interviewed him, episode number 404, if anybody wants to listen to it. And Leo building a self-flying car with 12 propellers that looks like a UFO, but that was unintentional because he went back to Leonardo da Vinci's book and saw a drawing of the tank that Leonardo built, and he was like, okay, I'm going to build a car like that. And so flying cars seem like they're coming. They seem like they're here. Particularly a company called Joby is now public and is releasing the car. Leo was telling me that these things are actually flying in the air. It's all here, but nobody pays attention to it because it's too science fiction. Do you know anything about self-driving cars, flying cars? EV tolls is the correct nomenclature. What's your take on there?
I do not, but I did invest in something adjacent, lost a lot of money. There's a publicly listed company in the US called eHang, which is a Chinese company, and it was basically pilotless or autopilot kind of helicopters, drones, or passenger drones. Very cool, noisy, but it worked. But obviously the problem is getting permission, and it's very scary.
And how long ago was this?
Fairly recently, but I invested in them after they were already public. So this is one of the sort of penny stocks or pink sheet type of stocks that you invest in, and lost all my money, unfortunately, or pretty much all my money. So I have it'll happen. Okay, so one thing I want to point out to your listeners. Someone else said this before me, but I agree with it. Invest in Bitcoin, not all your money, but focus your time and energy on learning AI. Don't invest in AI. Why? Because nobody knows what's going to happen. Yes, if you can get into open AI at a good valuation, although there is no good valuation, then maybe. But don't be like the people investing in SpaceX. Matt Levine, former Citibank investment banker and Bloomberg money columnist, has a great article that just came out, or essay yesterday, I think, about how small accredited investors, people who say they're worth, $1 million, or whatever the accredited investor limits are, $2 million, say they make 300,000 a year over a couple of years, last couple of years, or they are, barely at that level. They're investing in SpaceX through SPVs at double or triple the fair market price because they can't get in as an institutional investor and get on the cap table. They're being ripped off, and they just want to be able to tell their friends at a cocktail party.
That they're an investor at SpaceX.
I'm a SpaceX investor. I support innovation. There are lots of ways to support innovation without pouring money down the drain.
So what is an SPV?
Special purpose vehicle. It's basically a way to cobble together a bunch of small checks from individual investors between $10,000 to $500,000 each, bundle up together, and then the SPV, or the special purpose vehicle, gets on the SpaceX cap table by buying shares directly from SpaceX or from a secondary investor. So they could buy from some Steve Jurvetson, who is a Silicon Valley sort of former VC, now angel investor, or whatever he's doing, and buy his shares in SpaceX, or someone else who's selling. I'm not saying Steve's selling, but it would be someone like that who's an original investor in SpaceX, and then you just buy in the secondary market.
It's so interesting. is that what happened? AngelList was a big part. AngelList started before that, right? That basically would you say that AngelList started the SPV boom?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. List syndicates. So you as an angel investor, usually a small angel investor, you can have indirect exposure to startups. I did many angel list syndicates, WeFunder, where I'm a small direct investor in WeFunder, like all these crowd equity funding platforms, Founders Club, did many of those with tiny exposures to different companies. Some of my bigger bets were in Bitmain, which is a Chinese Bitcoin mining legal monopoly, their vertical monopoly. Pretty unethical company, to be honest. So I was very happy not to have to pony up the cash. Not that I had it necessarily to be on the cap table, but I could just do a smaller amount and get in the indirect exposure through an SPV. That was through iAngel Co. The founders I mentored briefly. They're in Israel, two female founders, very entrepreneurial, very, very good. But yeah, basically, it's sexy, but I don't do angel investing or AngelList syndicates, partly because the return on investment, given the adjusting for risk, is not good. You really have to be brilliant, lucky, right place, right time. You can be brilliant and not in Silicon Valley and not get the deal flow. So if it's,
does that mean that it only makes sense to either invest in public markets or invest in startups that you somehow have access to early in a seed stage before anyone else looks at it? And no, because that's where the luck and the risk is.
Yeah,
because the risk
I would say it makes no sense for 99.99999% of your listeners and viewers to invest in startups. Period.
Yeah.
Because even if you get access early, you're not getting access to the best startups. Those are going to Y Combinator, Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia, and so forth. Craft Ventures with David Sachs.
Yeah.
They're not going to me or your listeners. There's no effing way. It's almost 0%. So it's a waste of time. You can do a little bit for fun because you're bored, but I would limit it to 0.1% of your total net worth.
Yeah.
Or less. Perfectly fair.
And let's go back to Bitcoin in this framing, because this is really interesting. And if you have a hard stop at the hour, let me know. But the Bitcoin is, you do?
No, I do not have a hard stop. I always block out, especially for you, I block out extra time.
Cool. So so Bitcoin is Bitcoin the new public market? Are the current public markets overregulated to the point that it's crazy in them? What's your take on Bitcoin versus public market investing? Like what do you think there?
Yeah, sure. So number one, we are where we are, meaning Bitcoin is not subject to anti-fraud because it's not a security. So Rule 10b-5, which gives individuals a private right of action. So the SEC has all these rules on anti-fraud. No misleading misstatements or omissions. No, don't be misleading. Don't leave out stuff that a normal investor would find meaningful and affect their investment decision, whether they'd invest more or not at all or whatever, or less if they knew, about all these risks. So that's one. There's a lot of, I believe, still price manipulation in Bitcoin, partly just because of concentration risk. Or Bitcoin has a lot of OGs who own a lot of Bitcoin. Michael Saylor owns a lot of Bitcoin. These people can move the markets through their words and just talking, right? Michael Saylor, I'm gonna sell my Bitcoin, crash the market while he's rebuying. That would be illegal and he'd get investigated, but he could do it and then litigate. And who knows how much enforcement there would be in a Trump administration. I think that he would still be liable privately. Publicly, he should be, but if they got the SEC and DOJ, who knows? but privately, you'll still be able to sue and win as a MSTR shareholder or whatever. But remember, like, the damage is more to the price of Bitcoin, and it's not a security. So you'd have to be suing Michael Saylor, presumably under another theory. This is not legal advice. I'm not a practicing lawyer anymore, so could be wrong. But Bitcoin, there's more price manipulation than, let's say, Apple or Microsoft at scale, because those are highly regulated, deeper markets in some ways.
Yeah.
Less subject to emotion and taking advantage of retail. But Bitcoin is something, just to tie things together, that if you can afford to hold it at least 10 years or 5 years, but if I were you, I would buy some every day, week, month, or whatever. Just automatically set it and forget it. What most people do, including myself, is they might do a combination of that and then buy the dips. But the dips that most people define is it going from 102,000 to 98,000. What you want to do is realize, hey, hopefully you bought Bitcoin before the run up. Now that it's at 100 or whatever, you might buy some, but you save some cash so that if it does drop to 80,000, 60,000, 40,000, who knows, maybe even 25,000. I don't think it'll go below that. But you buy some along the way and you just wait it out during this bear market. But you have to have deep conviction.
Yeah.
And that means you have to understand all the arguments. And that's where ChatGPT Pro and these other tutors, free 24/7 objective tutors, can come in to help you maintain and your understanding and also deepen your conviction and learning and understand all the arguments, good and bad, help you become less emotional when you're investing and understand why you bought Bitcoin in the first long-term store value.
That gives me an idea for a wrapper.
So Bitcoin is the S&P 500 investment where you allocate, between something meaningful, could be 0.1% to 50% or whatever, depending on your net worth. For most people, most people should not be 100% in Bitcoin or over 50% at all. But younger, you understand it, yeah, you can be 50%. Have some other investments like the S&P 500. And older, you want less because you have negative cash flow, just like the US government.
So you just gave me a great idea for an AI wrapper, LLM wrapper, on top. So BTC as a tutor, but some sort of fine-tuned BTC tutor that also hooks into the investment platforms so that you can make dollar cost average investment or something like that. Is that illegal? Do you think that would be illegal?
No, there should be a way to make it legal. I'm convinced, especially under Trump, where they seem to not want to enforce any laws on the books or make it less regulatory. So it's good and bad, right? You're going to have more retail getting ripped off by these scammers and getting away with it. Illegal gambling, illegal securities, illegal Ponzi's, and pyramid schemes. But you will have more freedom and less debanking. So American retail will be more on par with the retail investors around the world where there's no regulation.
Yeah, who already deal with that. I mean, in Argentina, like it all happens in Argentina.
Can you elaborate on the Argentina part real quick, just so listeners can understand?
Yeah, well, so I mean, Argentina is so there's 4 types of economies in the world. There's developed countries, developing countries, Japan, and Argentina. And so the joke there is that basically Japan transcends what we think of because it's not part of the West, but it went through the same development cycles as the West. Argentina also transcends it because it was a developed Western country, and then something happened in the early 1910s and 1920s. Nobody knows what it is. And so it's just a crazy place that transcends Western understandings of development. And so, and in this craziness, I love it because I also identify with it, which Brazil also struggles with, which is like unmet potential that could be met, but is not currently being met. Uh,
Yeah.
and, and Argentina feels like it's ready, it's maturing at this crazy time. We can go all the way back into Argentine history for this, which is Peron, and I'm sure that will anger a lot of Argentines. Which I mean, I love your country. I don't mean to anger you about your country, but you have Peron, who basically mixed welfare state from the left with authoritarian rightist fascist sort of thing. So he mixed these two things together in a way that created the most intense welfare state in the entire Western world. And we are now at the end of that. That is clearly shown to be really not a great idea. And the United States is also kind of learning this experience. The one big difference I noticed with the Argentines and with the United States citizens is that the Argentines know exactly what's happening, and the United States citizens walk around with their heads in the sand and are not paying attention to a lot of the things we've been discussing. But we could go back to the early part of it and be like, okay, well, you know, it might not be as bad in the United States as it is in Argentina. It's really bad in Argentina. And why is it really bad in Argentina? Because they don't have access to a dollar printer. They do have access to a peso printer. And they've gone to the full extent of printing the peso. It would have been a great trade. You know, this really, our whole conversation could be wrapped up in this, is that it would have been a great trade for anybody to have bought a lot of pesos back in January. But nobody would make that trade. But it would have been a great trade because it was 1,300 pesos to the US dollar. One of my friends did it, and he was brilliant for it. I unfortunately did not do it, and nobody would trust the peso because they've just been printed it all. So there's this weird sort of like, everybody knows it. Government is corrupt. The welfare state is corrupt. They're all just making the top 0.1%, 0.01% of the Argentine government a lot of money, a lot of money, all of which have access to U.S. bank accounts, all of whom have access to U.S. investment opportunities, real estate, all of those different things. And so those people basically treated the welfare state as the way to get votes, and then also do their corrupt dealings and such. And so unregulated, but Argentines know that, and Argentines are some of the most savvy entrepreneurs. There's tons of our Argentine entrepreneurs inside of great startups in the United States who just know how to do business, because Buenos Aires is just like the most chaotic, crazy place where there used to be this prosperity, but the prosperity doesn't exist and has been hollowed out in the same way that we've been hollowing it out. Yeah, any questions there?
Yes. Do you think that the difference might be related to, because I do, the severity and duration of inflation in Argentina, that they're just like, screw it. It obviously doesn't work and it's horrible. How much of it is that versus just a reaction to, this isn't working, we're just going to go the other way, this guy's offering something different, let's see if it works.
So
because in the US, sorry, just real quick, in the US, I see the reaction to Bush and the financial crisis, Obama winning. I remember Obama trailing McCain-Palin. Biden was trailing McCain-Palin until the financial crisis in the polls. Yeah. So even though they had a better ground game and might have won anyway, based on the polls, until the financial crisis happened with Lehman imploding in September 11th, around there, 2008, Obama won as a react. Like, once the financial crisis happened, it was over, basically, in retrospect. Like, there's no way they're going to vote for Bush's third term, John McCain. And then Obama won re-election because, you know, maybe Mitt Romney did not run a good campaign. Obama recovered from the first debate, et cetera, et cetera. The economy was doing well enough. But then Obama did not get a third term. Hillary Clinton lost to Trump. Then Trump did COVID lockdowns and money printing. It happened on his watch, whatever the reason. He did not get a second term. People went for Biden. Biden high inflation, and Trump won. So in the US, you could say it's just swinging between left and right authoritarians, although Trump is running now more on limited government deregulation, so less authoritarian. And he also, to his credit, I did not support Trump in the last election, no comment on prior, but he did not start new wars. So that's less authoritarian, but he was still kind of authoritarian, like dollar must be strong, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
It's so hard to figure out. It's so hard to figure out. And I have a similar sort of path. First I'll answer the Argentine. Hopefully I'll remember to go back to the point I want to make about U.S. system. But the Argentine system, the corollary there is that Milei is not the first person. So there has been Macri and Bullrich. These are two previous attempts to try to rein in the situation. So this has been going on for a lot longer. While the U.S. has been access to the dollar printer in the 2000s, the Argentina did not have that. So in 2001, there was a forced devaluation of the peso. You had people in their bank accounts. The government went in and devalued their dollars inside of their peso savings. They devalued their peso savings inside of their bank account. Government just came in and said, nope, okay, your pesos are worth 1/2 of what they were before. All of a sudden, middle class Argentine was like, what just happened? And then, so this has been a long burn. The early 2000s, the Kirchnerists, they basically were using the U.S. the Argentine system as their personal penny bank, just total corruption. Hopefully I don't. Again, I mean no disrespect to the host country, but like just total corruption. And so people have tried this before. Milei is the first one where it's like he's the one really offering the bitter medicine that is required, and people are behind him. There is also this sort of sneaky religious thing that is also tied into it that we can go into if we want. But to tie it back to the U.S. system, what you were saying about it feels like the Democrats became the sort of establishment elite. And so not only was there no argument against them within the circles, with the censorship, it became harder to actually disagree. And that's where the illusion comes in, is that when we can no longer disagree, that's the point at which things go haywire. And that's why I would say that I'm a little bit less optimistic about what's going on in the United States, is that it's just too soon. It's too close to it. But I'm open to being more optimistic about it as well.
Yeah, logically you're right, but we've seen that underestimating Elon Musk, estimating maybe even Vivek, and RFK Jr. is a mistake. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
but I'm hopeful. But yeah, I'd say we're going in the right direction, even if it doesn't work. It's fine. By the way, I do have a hard stop at 10:30. I apologize.
Oh no, it's
I put half-hour buffer, but yeah.
We'll go another 5 to 10 minutes.
Or longer if you wish. But yeah, this is very interesting talk.
So,
I really think if we can move away from authoritarianism, whether you're left libertarian, right libertarian, moderate, probably more of a moderate libertarian, centrist libertarian, if there is such a thing, or crypto anarchists, voluntarists. Like ideally, in a perfect world, everybody would voluntarily donate to charity, voluntarily help their neighbors, but that doesn't happen in reality. So that's why we come up with taxes, so the wealthy can kind of subsidize the poor and make the safety net, right?
Let's do 5
safety net.
Let's do 5 more minutes on that. What do you see as the AI generated future of wealth? Of wealth? What happens to wealth? And what happens to taxes and government?
So one of the big areas that AI can cut costs and make things more efficient is to help you as a person, as a citizen or taxpayer, deal with the government bureaucracies and their agencies and their ridiculous websites and apps that barely work or have all these problems that a 5-star or 4.8 rated 4.8 out of 5 rated app that's popular
Yeah.
on iOS or Android,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you don't have those UX issues and red tape. But you could, on the government side, what's even more exciting is you could use AI to make workers, as you don't replace them, right, as they retire or quit or get fired, or laid off, you can replace them with a lot of AI. So there's no
Yes.
need to fire people necessarily, just through natural attrition, lack
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
being
Interesting.
appreciated, Elon, making you feel offended, then you quit. That's okay.
Yeah.
You earned your pension, and you earned your whatever severance and move on. And then you might not be replaced with a new hire. You might be replaced with
Yeah. It's a
$2
replacement. That's how it's going to happen.
that
Interesting.
and that can save a lot of streamlining. So for example, right now there's a lot of people tweeting on X, and ChatGPT 01 Pro mode is pretty new. It's just a couple days old. But people are posting on Twitter or X already about how ChatGPT, the Pro mode, has helped them with legal analysis where they save $1,500 in legal fees because they're comparing what ChatGPT Pro does in analyzing a legal issue versus a lawyer. And then they're also becoming twice as productive or finding um, re errors in code, right, as they're coding or
Yeah.
cleaning
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
refactoring, which means like rebuilding the code in a more efficient, streamlined way. And I want to use it to see if I, as a layperson, can get ChatGPT Pro to does this how long does this take before it airs, by the way? I don't want to give away all
Well,
my
that'll depend on you. Basically, if you want it to air next week, we can do that, or otherwise, it could be a couple months, just because I have a lot
what's
of
this yeah, what's the sentence next week?
next Friday.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. So I'm gonna use ChatGPT Pro and report back to you through DMs about what I find, but I'm gonna use it to go through Bitcoin Core and document it in a way that
Oh,
people who are not technical can understand. This is where the supply cap is, this part of the code. You can see blah, blah, blah. Or this is where, we solve the double spending, these parts, right? Problem. And things like that. So I think it's going to be super cool, because it's something that maybe a technical person might not have thought of, but it's something that's, I will be the good person to test to see if I understand the documentation, because I'm not that technical and I haven't coded in high school. So if I can understand it, there's a good chance other non-technical people can appreciate this documentation that isn't there right now.
Brilliant. Okay, well, yeah. So, how can people find out to DM you about this thing that you're going to do next Friday?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So let's see. I'm on WhatsApp at 415-894-9293. That's 415-894-9293. WhatsApp and Signal are good places to reach me. And I'm also, if you and I connected, I think on Facebook, that's a good place where I will chat with my friends about stuff I'm interested in. So I'll chat about this and we can comment and chime in, or, tell me I'm an idiot and why, and so
Always
forth.
with the
But yeah,
why. You can only tell me I'm an idiot if you do the why.
preferably, yeah. Well, if you no, you can say whatever you want, but if you don't say the lie, I'm not going to take it very seriously, right? Laugh it off,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And looking forward to the next
Yeah,
one.
sure.
And thank you.
Yeah, awesome reconnecting, and we'll get you back to LA somehow.